I do love indie games, but there are times when I can't see them getting their own 10 to 30 minute review. Maybe because they're too short, or they may not have the kind of visuals that would make for an interesting watch on YouTube, or maybe I just don't want to ruin the experience by showing you too much. In that spirit, this is a collection of 5 bite-sized reviews that I figured I could stitch together like some kind of Frankenstein's monster. Not all of these are horror games, in fact most of them aren't really scary at all, but they've got that kind of vibe, and I'll do my best to give you an idea of each game and my feelings on them without spoilers. Speaking of building something creepy, we'll start out with a trip to
The Cabin Factory.
The Cabin Factory is a first-person look and find 'em up in the vein of the 10 Bells and Platform 8. You might think that it looks like a Unity Store asset flip, and I'm not entirely sure you'd be wrong, but the game loop is proven, and if I had to pick, I'd say that this is the best I've played of the genre.
The brutal fire that burned a family alive took place in an isolated cabin in the woods. 2 bodies were found calcinated on Sunday evening after 3 hikers noticed a huge column of smoke and immediately called 911. When emergency crews arrived just minutes later, the flames were still burning.
Believe it or not, the player is working in a factory that makes cabins, but they're not building them. Instead, they're tasked with going into each cabin and making sure that they're not haunted. That might make you think of phasmophobia, but it's not really that deep, and for the most part, it's not really that scary either. Though this is the only game on this list that did actually make me jump a few times. My wife and I played through this with our kids, both younger than 10, and though it might have been a little much for the youngest, there was nothing gory and they absolutely loved it. If it's any indication of quality, when I went back to get footage for this video, they wanted to play through it all over again. Hauntings present as moving objects in the cabins. Sometimes it'll be obvious, but other times it's subtle to the point where I actually had to look up a few that I kept getting wrong. A key thing to keep in mind, though, is that something is not paranormal just because it's creepy or different from the cabin that came before it. If nothing is actively moving in the cabin, then it's not haunted. There's a pool of predefined cabins to investigate, and once you've successfully tagged a cabin as abnormal, it'll be taken out of the rotation, so if you get one wrong, you'll get another chance. There is an achievement for finding all of the haunted cabins, but whether you've seen them all or not, the goal is just to get 8 correct in a row. The story is pretty minimal and plays out over the course of the hauntings. You can probably go through the whole thing in an hour and see everything in the game in about an hour and a half. Given the chance, I would have bought an expansion that added more cabins, but I was still pretty happy with what I got for the price. You can try it yourself for $3 on Steam, and it occasionally goes as low as $2.25. If that 75 cents is a deciding factor for you, and if it is, I am sorry. I get it though. It's rough out there. You never know where your next meal is coming from. In fact, it reminds me of a fable I once heard called
The Hungry Fly.
The Hungry Fly is a first-person fly simulator. There's even a dedicated button to rub your little hands together. It might be the weirdest game on this list of admittedly pretty weird games. You play as a very hungry fly searching a swamp for something to eat. The only problem is, this fly can only eat dead things, and nothing in this world can ever die. Gameplay involves buzzing around looking for edibles and talking to NPCs. You could think of this as a walking simulator with light puzzle elements, but also a thick layer of symbolism and psychological horror, all wrapped up in a kid's storybook. Fair warning, I didn't come across anything sexual, but there are some really big spiders, as well as what some might consider disturbing themes and visuals if that's something you're worried about or something you're into. I'm not showing most of them to avoid spoilers, but they are in there. And I don't want to oversell this, but I've played lots of intentionally strange games. You probably know the kind I'm talking about. Weird art pieces or wannabe drug trips, but The Hungry Fly strikes this really fascinating balance of being aesthetically gross and cerebrally fucked up in a way that I'm not sure I can really do justice with words. It's a story of depression, disability, loneliness, self-harm, and self-loathing, and I'm intentionally keeping this section of the video short specifically because I don't want to show you too much. But it's the kind of game that I would make a friend play without telling them anything about it, just so they could understand what I'm feeling, and then we could bond in the weirdness of what the fuck just happened. So I guess I'm recommending it to you because I can't force a controller into your hands, but you'll have to try it for yourself if anything I've said piques your curiosity. The Hungry Fly is maybe an hour and a half long, 2 to 3 if you want to see all of the endings, and normally goes on Steam for $10, but you can get it on sale for $7. Just don't blame me if the game crosses over your discomfort.
Threshold.
Threshold is a first-person stress management game and menial labor simulator where the player is stationed on top of a mountain and tasked with maintaining the speed of an infinitely long train. Due to the altitude, they will slowly suffocate over time, and this is made worse when the train slows down because they need to expend some of their limited oxygen to blow a whistle and speed it back up. Along the way, you'll be given a few other odd jobs, and those do use some of that air supply, but successfully finishing those tasks and maintaining the train's speed will see the player rewarded with tickets for air canisters so they can keep the machine going. If that all sounds pretty simple, it is. There are light story elements to the game and secrets to find, but there's not a ton going on, so I don't have a lot of wiggle room to really say more. It doesn't take long to clock that this game is a bit of a cultural critique. The closest comparison I can draw would probably be to mouthwashing, which I've spoken about before, but Threshold never really reaches the same heights for me as that game did. Where mouthwashing is a compelling and sharply written critique of late-stage capitalism and personal responsibility and several other things, Threshold reads a bit more like activism. It doesn't feel like it's really telling a story or trying to be a game, but that game is the medium that was chosen to try to convince the player to feel a certain way about something the creator is passionate about. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but it's worth knowing before you go in expecting some deeper mechanics or narrative. I don't dislike the game, but it does feel a bit one-dimensional, even with its multiple endings. Maybe that's the end result of being made by a single developer instead of a team. Still, as with everything else published by Critical Reflex, the vibes are immaculate and I do think it was worth my time. If it looks interesting to you, check it out. It's normally $10 on Steam, but goes on sale for $6. And you know what? I can't come up with a nice transition for this next one. I'm not even sure how you're supposed to say
Navicula Meatus.
Yeah, that. It's a first-person dungeon-crawling puzzle game and schizophrenia simulator where you'll wander the streets of a dystopian city surrounded by monsters that don't actually want to hurt you. I'm assuming that's because you are also a terrifying monster, or they're just a bunch of homeless people and this is actually set somewhere in Eastern Europe. Either way, they will attempt to speak to you in archaic runes and pictures, and the game offers you no guidance whatsoever. Even the menus don't bother telling you a damn thing, and if you pause the game and click the wrong part of this inner ear diagram, you'll go back to the main menu and have to start all over because it doesn't save your progress either. This is a bold choice by the developer, and I admit that I had one foot out the door when 15 minutes into this game I still had no fucking clue what it wanted me to do. I walked down the hallway, spoke to a mound of eyeballs, and went down the vagina elevator none the wiser. After speaking to every NPC I could find, and through the powers of prayer and autism, I was eventually able to parse enough of the rules of this strange world to get into a Lovecraftian nightclub and acquire a ticket for a boat ride to the game's first ending. If you pay attention to this ending and click around enough, only then will you finally unlock the ability to read and therefore no longer be allowed to vote. Now I was on my way, and starting another playthrough, finally able to communicate, was interesting, but to pursue more of the game means going back through the randomized daisy chain of fetch quests for monsters. I made friends, I made sausage, and while thinking about a puzzle involving shields, I accidentally clicked the button to go back to the main menu, and I made new curse words. I wasn't willing to start the game over again, but I know that there are a lot of sickos out there that live for this kind of obtuse shit, and I hope they find this game because it's clearly a labor of love. It's not a bad game, but it seems like the developer really wanted to craft a very specific experience, and I am a piss baby spoiled on the convenience of modern gaming. If you don't mind not having your adventures pre-chewed and decide to give it a shot, the developer has built a website to specifically offer tips and hints to get you through it without spoiling the experience entirely, but I didn't find it until after I had already given up. I can't tell you how long the game is. I didn't finish it, and according to how long to beat, that is not an uncommon problem. But maybe you can be the one to make gaming history. Navicula Meatus is on Steam for $6 and it goes on sale for less than $5. Even if the game didn't really resonate with me though, I have a lot of respect for the developer. It takes a thick skin to put yourself out there the way they do and open yourself up to criticism. That's not me. I'm a skeleton, and that means I've got
no skin.
No Skin is a roguelite turn-based dungeon crawler and young adult with terrible friends who is too afraid to be alone simulator. Let's just get it out of the way. It's a pixel art game that looks like it came out of RPG Maker. That's a big turnoff for a lot of people, and with very few exceptions, I'm one of them. Still, I think this one is worth your consideration if you aren't completely against the genre on principle. The setup is that one night, during what sounds like a miserable party full of miserable people, the player stumbles upon a man with no skin. Tasked with finding said dermis under threat of death, they must wander the building, fighting increasingly monstrous versions of those terrible friends and contending with eldritch horrors from beyond space and time. On each round of the game, the player must choose from a small pool of rooms, and each room has several possible events that will occur. These will generally either be combat or an NPC that can give buffs or items, and a small chance for a mysterious event like the game pretending to delete your save file. No matter how a room resolves, progress will be gained towards the final confrontation with the No Skin Man. As that percentage increases, the pool of possible rooms changes and the enemies grow stronger. Combat is a slight twist on a standard turn-based RPG, but with no experience or levels. Instead, you earn shards that let you unlock new items in shops or new rooms for future runs. And it's this addition of the rogue elements that really manages to bring this game up to the level of being worth a recommendation for me. You might find an item that lets you try to flee twice in one round, or a weapon that causes enemies to drop more shards, and there are alternate characters with their own completely different power scaling mechanics. This is all good. I like parts of the roguelite design and the art and the sound, and that there's so much to unlock. The not so good was that there's a relatively small pool of rooms and each run can last like 45 minutes. From poking around online, it seems like the game expects you to complete all of the side content and at least 10 different difficulty levels of the main story loop to get the true ending. And for me, the combat just didn't have that kind of staying power. With something like Spelunky or Binding of Isaac, it's the variety and the skill expression that allows the repetition of those game loops to still shine dozens and hundreds of hours later, but you just don't get that out of a turn-based RPG. So while it won't be for everyone, if this kind of game is your jam, you can grab a copy for $7 on Steam or $5.25 on sale. And that's all I've got for this one. There's a lot of great indie games out there. I hope I was able to show you something new. Have a good one, and as always, thanks for watching. Later.